Who are the format specialists in head-to-head points and roto leagues? Find out next on Fantasy Baseball Today in 5. Welcome into FBT in 5. As always, make sure to follow and stream us on Spotify. Today is Thursday, March 3rd. I am Frank Stanfield, joined by Scott White. And let's start with the biggest head-to-head points standouts in terms of hitters. And we've got Rhys Hoskins, Alex Bregman, and Jesse Winker. Scott, what do each of these hitters do that makes them stand out in that format?
Well, they walk a lot. That is the main thing each of them does. I believe Rhys Hoskins actually led the NL in walks in 2019. Last year was actually his worst year as far as walk rate goes, and yet still Rhys Hoskins averaged 3.21 head-to-head points per game. That was more than Pete Alonso averaged. So regardless of what sort of batting average Rhys Hoskins delivers, I think it's fair to say he's going to be a must-start in points leagues. Not necessarily the case in Roto, though, of course, his power helps him in that format. Alex Bregman, it's kind of a double whammy, because in addition to walking a lot, he doesn't strike out much. And strikeouts are penalized in points leagues in a way they aren't in Roto. In fact, over the last 4 years, Bregman actually has more walks than strikeouts. So we have questions about his power production now with the introduction of the new ball last year. I'm a little fearful he's more of a 20 to 25 homer guy moving forward. But the plate discipline is going to keep him close to elite in points leagues anyway. I tier him with Austin Riley and Nolan Arenado in that format when I have Bregman a tier behind in Roto. And then Jesse Winker, I mentioned the points per game for Rhys Hoskins. Jesse Winker averaged 3.72 head-to-head points per game last year. Among outfielders who had as many at-bats as him last year, the only ones to average more points per game than that were Fernando Tatis, Juan Soto, and Bryce Harper.
Nasty season from Jesse Winker. A head-to-head points standout in terms of pitchers. Framber Valdez, Scott, he has this huge loopy curveball, but what else does he do that makes him stand out in a points league?
He pitches deep into games, and while that, of course, matters in Roto leagues as well, it increases the impact of ERA and WHIP. It allows the pitcher to win more games. It has a direct effect in points leagues. Every inning is worth 3 points. So if you have a pitcher who doesn't stand out as much in terms of ratios, he can make up for it with volume. And I think Framber Valdez is a good example of that. Being an extreme ground ball guy, he's also susceptible to a WHIP that's a little on the high side, over 1.2. WHIP has no direct value in points leagues the way it does in Roto. It's 25% of starting pitcher's production in Roto. But in points leagues, you lose points for hits and walks allowed, but it just, the impact of that is felt less. So that's why Valdez stands out more in points leagues.
All right, on the Roto category side of things, we have 3 standout hitters in that format: Javier Baez, Adalberto Mondesi, and Tim Anderson. Scott, what do they do in this format that maybe makes them not as valuable in a points league?
Well, the main thing they do is steal bases, and that is probably the single biggest differentiator between the two formats, just because stolen bases have become so scarce and yet maintain the same value that they always have in Roto leagues. They're essential in Roto leagues. They're one of the 5 hitter categories. So everybody wants to get enough of them, and yet there's less to go around. So it inflates the value of everybody who does contribute to that category. But it's a double whammy for these 3 as well, because they're also poor plate discipline guys. So they're not walking much. And in the case of Javier Baez, especially, they're striking out a lot. So that has no direct value on them in Roto leagues, but in points leagues, they're not getting the points other hitters would get from the walks. They're losing points other hitters win it from the strikeouts, and so it pushes them down in that format. I think that's especially true for Baez, who averaged, despite being a 31 homer, 18 steal guy last year, he averaged 2.86 head-to-head points per game last year. Ty France was 2.84, basically identical. So Baez was not really a standout in the points league format last year. Adalberto Mondesi, he might go 10 rounds later in points leagues than he does in Roto.
Scott, quickly, let's talk about Freddy Peralta from a Roto categories perspective. He is awesome, but probably not going to give you that many innings.
Yeah, look, he's still a must start in points leagues, but you're giving up a little something with him in points leagues in all likelihood, because it's not clear how much volume he's going to give you, how consistently he'll pitch deep into starts, how many innings he'll accumulate over a full season. And that is, innings purely is the biggest differentiator for pitchers between points and Roto. But he should give you a big strikeout total, even if the innings suffer a little bit. He should have a great whip. He should rank right up there with the other aces in Roto. Not necessarily true in points leagues.
All right. For more extensive fantasy baseball coverage, listen to the Fantasy Baseball Today podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, your smart speakers, or anywhere else podcasts are found. And thanks for listening to Fantasy Baseball Today in 5. We'll be back again tomorrow morning. Bye-bye.